know that you viewers and listeners obviously don't hear the pre-conversation, the conversation before we come to you with this recording. But I got to say, my excitement level is at a new height right now because not only do we have Kevin Ezell here, the esteemed Holy Reverend Dr. Kevin Ezell, but we have a new software and it has a countdown on it. And I get to watch on the screen 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Man, that's cool stuff, Kevin.
Hey, it's always helpful to have those A's that tell you when to talk and when to shut up,
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I certainly listen to the former and usually ignore the latter, and that's why I get in trouble. Kevin, we have a three-part series on how churches are growing in a post-COVID world. And if you were with Kevin and me in the episode that was released on May 12th, we talked about churches that aren't growing. Why are you doing aren't growing in a series on ungrowing? Because we wanted to show you the comparison group. We wanted to, what statisticians call the control group. And this research, again, Kevin told me not to push it too much because I was right on the borderline of boring. But this research is called qualitative research, where we're getting answers from people asking questions until we get to a point of saturation, another statistical term that's boring, where we begin to hear the same types of answers over and over. That's what we're presenting to you. This is brand new research. This is information that is being shared with you for the first time through Revitalize and Replant and through the gracious gift of the North American Mission Board that's providing this to you as a ministry. So this time we're talking about the attitudinal shift in growing churches in a post-COVID world. One thing I've noticed about you, among other things, Kevin, is that when we talk about churches, and when we're talking about churches, we're talking about church leaders, it is not unusual for you to go right to that thing on attitudes. I mean, you talk about the mindset, the attitude of the leaders. Why is that?
Well, because that directly affects the church. I mean, the church really does take on the personality and the attitude of the leader. And, to me, you can tell a lot about somebody's trajectory and coming out of a problem or in the midst of a problem, how their approach to it is going to tell you a lot about how to me, how it's going to go. And, I like to, we're even hiring staff, I like to throw things out to get a sense about their attitude toward things other than, say, NAM or the church I was pastoring, just to kind of see if they round up or they round down. I mean, people typically have
That's
a
a great
trend.
phrase. We got to write that down. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But they typically, if they do it one way, they do it in every way. Typically, they'll round down or round up, and so I just want guys who hey, may be in the pit, but we're going to do the best, whatever it takes. We're going to make it happen, or everything's always going wrong, and what's going to go wrong next, and you see it every day, and
so what are you seeing post COVID?
I see the guys who during COVID, took the mess of all of it and tried to make the very best of it, and were very aggressive at trying to reach people. They adapted, adjusted, and they use it as markers, not as excuses. Like, look, okay,
That's good.
This is what it is, but here's how we're going to pull ourselves out. And again, not knowing, you don't know if it's going to be successful or not, but you at least have a plan. I always tell guys, have a plan, but be willing to call audibles. That's what I love about Acts, the book of Acts 13, when they sent out Paul and Barnabas. I know it was Saul and Barnabas in Acts 13, but they sent them out. They were constantly, they were led by the Holy Spirit, but then it says, but then they were they were adjusted here or moved here and constantly changing their plan. Pastors have to do that. They have a plan, but be ready to call audibles at a moment's notice. And again, that's all in your attitude. If you see a bump or sometimes you can be benefited by something interrupting your wrong plan to adjust. And I've found that already. Guys have come out of COVID and have jettisoned a lot of things in their ministry that they're thankful for, And again, they had the right attitude. It was an opportunity to shed some things they should have been shedding. So,
Well, certainly COVID has put the whatever metaphor you want to use, magnifying glass or microscope on the other end on a lot of these things. I want to talk about what we talk with many of these leaders who are not who are not dealing with some of these situations. First of all, you got one of the ways that you don't lead with the right attitude is if you don't accept reality. And for example, in COVID, many leaders were saying as soon as all of the quarantine and restrictions over, we're going to be the same church we were before
mm,
COVID. So when we talk about attitude, acceptance of reality, and I got to say, I want to say this and embarrass you just a little bit. I did watch you and talk to you right when uh, everybody was going into quarantine, including all of your team at the North American Mission Board, and you were already planning. You were already saying some things. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. Uh, you didn't necessarily like what was going on, but you were prepared for it. And you had like three different. You may not remember it, Kevin, but you had like, if it does this, we're going to do this. If it does this, we're going to. You had three action plans going on in your mind, and I made up the number three, but you had more than one
yeah.
going on in your mind. So
Well,
you reflected that attitude.
well, you're kind. You're kind. Hey, you watch movies. Apollo 13. I just watched that again the other day. I
Yes,
love
sir.
that movie, but I love it when they bring all that stuff and they throw it on the table and say, failure is not an option. You got to figure this out. And that's really what COVID was to a good bit.
Yep.
And I'm grateful. In COVID, we gone through an exercise about 3 years before COVID and just said, look, if we get hit with something that takes away 40% of our budget, what would you do and how would you
Wow.
budget?
Really? Before you ever knew of COVID?
Yeah, we did about that was back in 2017. And so I said, okay, something happened. 40% of our income's gone. What would you do? All I was trying to see is what they really valued and in what order. You know who's least important. If okay, they're the first one you throw off the ship. I always wanted to see what they valued, and so what we did when COVID came is we already had a plan that was somewhat close to what we wanted to do, and so threw it in there. But again, it's just good to constantly see there's what people say they value, and then what they really value when it comes down to crunch time, be it member or a pastor.
Well, we did the same at Church Answers. Obviously, a small organization than the North American Mission Board, but we were moving into more and more in person. We call them micros, where we do micro consultations with a group of 10 or 12. And we were booking them out and having just a lot of fruit at that. And we're talking about even doing something bigger. And obviously, in person came to a standstill. And
Right.
our micros were really we you really had to do them in person. We tried one or two with
Mm,
um, digital with watching it on Zoom, but it was not effective. So we knew we
right.
had to be in person. But what we did was we moved toward free presentations for a lot of people, called them webinars, and we put that out there, and it changed our organization. We may have thought about doing a webinar in the past, but now it changed who we were. So twice a month, usually, we were presenting new information, and
Mm,
gosh, Kevin, we would have 3,000, sometimes 4,000 people register for these things
mm.
because they were at home, they were watching
Sure.
this, and now we're pivoting again. But the acceptance of reality. In the previous episode, I gave the example of a church in Texas. And again, I'm not giving any more identifier than that. In that church in Texas, one of their big issues is I'm having trouble getting them to accept reality. To
Hmm.
just, this is, you cannot move from where you are until you can accept where you are. That sounds a little trite. So,
Right.
anyway, acceptance of reality. Here's another attitudinal shift. Now, this obviously turns into an action. The focus on conversion growth. And that's just simply having a mindset for evangelism. I know in Southern Baptist Convention, evangelism is down. Certainly not for lack of emphasis at the North American Mission Board. I can tell you some of the things that y'all have helped me with. But it's not just that denomination. It's all over the place.
Mm.
And I don't know what's going on, Kevin, but I just don't hear conversations about evangelism that makes it at the forefront of the attitude of leaders today. And you may be seeing something differently. I'm giving you my anecdotal response.
No, you're exactly right. It's what people come up and say, well, when's the North American Mission Board going to come up with a new evangelism tool? And I was like, well, honestly, we can come up with all the tools you want, but until you give it to someone who's actually going to use it, it's not going to make any difference, And so, it all goes back to an attitude. The pastor has to lead, and if the pastor doesn't lead the church to focus on reaching the lost, then it's just not going to happen. And so, it's about churches taking that and running with it. And so, but you're exactly right, Tom. To me that it's an overall attitude, overall focus. And I was with a guy the other day. He wanted to be a church planner. He and his wife wanted to go to lunch and talk about being church planner. And I said, well, tell me about the last time you shared your faith. He goes, well, now there's a problem. I said, what's that? He goes, that's just not my gift. He said, I pastor my people, but that's not my gift. I said, well, look, if it's not your gift, you'll never make it as a planner. Your best bet is stay pastor if they'll let you stay pastor, but you'll never make it as a planner if you don't share your faith. I mean,
Wow.
that was before they even brought the waters. I hate being 5 minutes into a lunch and knowing there's no reason to be here.
Golly, that was, to use a phrase of Kevin Ezell, that was the great reveal at,
Yeah.
at that moment. I tell you one of my stories. So I was talking to a church, not Southern Baptist, talking to a leader of a church, and he was all excited. And he said, I've just got a new heart for evangelism. And he really did. And I had great hope for the church. And he said, I found this tool. He said, have you ever heard of 3 circles? I said, yeah. That's something that the North American Mission Board put out. And, I think probably some within the denomination would say, hey, I discovered this new thing called 3 circles. What do you think about it? Man, I got permission from you to put it in a book recently. It is the best simple tool that is out there, in my humble opinion.
It's funny, people don't know that it came, like Jimmy Scroggins is the one that came up with it on a napkin, but what he was trying to do is he was doing a marriage conference and with a lot of people who were not believers, and was trying to come up with a simple way for them to understand. So often guys, when they start sharing their faith, they go with this, they really have this understanding that people have a basic biblical understanding of some things. And he was trying to come up with the most simple way to explain to these couples, how they're without Christ. And that's how it all started, on a napkin, so.
I can't imagine someone starting on a napkin. Yeah, I've done a few things like that myself. Hey, just to mention, and I'll ask Amy to put it in the show notes, the app is Life on Mission. It's
right.
the Life on Mission app, and it's free. And I keep it on my phone at all times. In fact, I'm just looking at it right now. And I'm trying to recall how many times, there you go, audience. There's your 3 circles.
There you go.
I'm trying to just get an idea of how many times I've opened that app. Say, let me show you this. Yeah. And it's so easy. I mean,
of course, I'm biased.
And even a ignorant introvert like me can share the gospel with that one.
I'm biased, but what's really nice on the app, to tell a pastor or a layman, if you just click a certain button, that it's got a video there that trains you as well. And then if you get really nervous, we've had people get nervous and you think, oh no, I'm going to mess it up. And they say, hey, just watch this video. And they've had people watch the video and accept Christ.
It's an incredible tool. And I cannot think of an evangelistic tool, quite frankly, that I have used with this level of frequency. There's been the training programs like Evangelism Explosion. What was before EE among Southern Baptists? I'm trying to remember the name of it. I know Faith came after EE.
Yeah, of course, Faith is one I use. I mean, still use. And I love telling the story about FAITH. And I had a lady get so confused with she was so nervous the first time she did it, and she did F, then she did A, and then she went straight to T. And she told the group,
You be fat.
they accepted Christ, and I didn't spell faith, I spelled fat. And so amazing. God can, you just have to be. Then that goes back to an attitude. You just got to be willing to be used as a tool, and God can take our imperfections or our insecurities and do something extraordinary with it.
Exactly. A renewed focus on the community. In the previous time, I talked about how one of our tools called Know Your Church is just open the eyes of people. And
Mm-hmm.
then a demographic tool or psychographic tool is ours is called Know Your Community.
Mm-hmm.
But just one of those tools to help you see who's in the community. But above all, the attitude has to be you love the community, and
Right.
that's the attitude situation, and that's who you've been as a pastor and as a person who's a leader of pastors now, Kevin.
Well, you're kind of when you're intellectually deficient, you got to rely on the attitude, and you got to have a little bit more spunk. So, but I just encourage pastors really. If one of the best things they could do is to be around pastors um, that are like who they want to be like, and you know who you're around can really impact how you lead. And I just encourage them to find people like that to be around.
Yep. If I ever want to talk to a pastor that gets me in a good frame of mind, I have three quick choices. Two of them are named Rayner. One of them's named Scroggins, and
Yeah,
I go to those three. I say, man, okay, now I feel good about the local church.
yeah,
It's a good thing to do, but you got to love your community. You can't reach your community unless you know your community. You can't reach your community unless you love your community,
hmm,
and so you have to have an attitude that says, I am going to love my community. So
right.
that's one of those. Hey, this other one, you read this in the email I sent you from the young pastor who watches Revitalize and Replant. He said one of the things that he had to do that he was just fearful of doing was confront some issues and people in the church in
Mm,
order for the church to move on. So if you have negativity, even toxicity in a church, you
mm.
got to deal with it. You have to have an attitude that removes that attitude.
No, absolutely. And yes, the old, the big leadership book where it talked about confront the brutal facts. It's hard to accept it, but then you've got to take that second shift and actually do something about it. I see guys when they lead so often they lead around things, and they when I talked to a guy the other day. He goes, I really feel like I need to hire another staff person to do what I can't get my student pastor to do. And I'm like, do what? And so I need to hire somebody to do something that you can't get the other guy to do. That's ridiculous. That's showing poor leadership on the pastor's part of not dealing with you know inconsistencies with the student pastor. But the guys sometimes they're constantly trying to move around. I found there was a pastor recently who did that. He took a big hit, the biggest giver in the church, the most dominant voice in the church, and just took him on and said, "Look, what you're doing is not right. We're not going to do that anymore." The guy left with his money, and now the church runs twice what it did.
There you go.
And not only does it run twice what it is, the guy's actually enjoying pastoring again.
He's having fun now.
Yeah. It's like, look, I'm sure it's the same with you. I never dealt with a problem like that the next day I didn't think to myself, man, I wish I'd done that sooner.
Exactly.
I never dealt with a really bad issue and the next day thinking, man, I wish I'd have waited. Uh, I've always, the feeling of that, the relief of it, it's worth any kind of temporary challenge you go through for the long-term gain.
I know I've told you this story, but I'll repeat it for you and for the listening and viewing audience. In the last church that I pastored before I realized that I shouldn't be a pastor anymore, that I was not nearly as qualified as a lot of other people. Now I went to be a dean, so I'll tell you something. The last church, there was a guy that had the most power of the finances in the church. I mean, he basically controlled the budget.
Right.
He was the yay or nay person, and though I did not know who gave what, the financial secretary finally, on her own, said, "I got to tell you, he's never given to the church."
Oh
And
my word.
at he had a network, and confronting him, boy, it may not have been a financial hit because we wasn't giving, but it was a hit
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to move him out. So yeah,
Mm,
walk away. That's an attitude that you got to be ready to walk away.
right.
And then the final one is a determination to move to 5 key actions. So, are y'all listening, audience? Are you viewers watching this? Once you get these 5 key actions, they're very, very important because we're going to cover them in the next episode with Kevin Ezell. So you got to come back for that. Kevin, we'll be talking about the actions next time. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Hey, always great to be with you. Appreciate the opportunity.
And always thank you, our audience, listening, viewing, whatever the case may be. YouTube, YouTube, subscribe, like, give us a rating or review on wherever you listen to the podcast. Always thank North American Mission Board. You heard them in the intro, and you'll hear them again as we finish this up. But thank you for being a part of Revitalize and Replant, and we'll continue to help churches get healthier together.